Welcome to the Ramayan, Stories of Dharm and Devotion. I'm Sandeep, and in this podcast, we'll journey together through the timeless epic of Valmiki's Ramayan, filled with stories of honor, sacrifice, devotion, and righteousness. Although it's rooted in Indian culture, the Ramayan offers universal lessons that resonate globally. The epic addresses themes such as the triumph of good over evil, loyalty, the struggles of the righteous, family duties, and the power of compassion. These values transcend cultural and religious boundaries, making the Ramayan relevant to everyone globally. We continue our journey through Bala Kanda, the first chapter of the Ramayan, which introduces us to the early adventures of Ram and Lakshman. Today's episode marks a significant moment in Ram's journey as we explore his confrontation with Tataka, the fearsome demoness who terrorized the forests, and the events involving her sons, Subahu and Maricha.
Vishwamitra, accompanied by Ram and Lakshman, ventured deep into the dark forest. The atmosphere was heavy, the sky was overcast, and the forest seemed to echo the anger and bitterness of its ruler, Tataka. The trees stood twisted, their branches like airy fingers reaching out, and the forest floor was littered with dead leaves and bones, making every step uncertain. The journey was filled with an eerie silence that only added to the tension. As they proceeded deeper, Vishwamitra spoke to Ram and Lakshman, explaining the importance of their mission. He reminded Ram that this was no ordinary journey, but a step toward his divine purpose. "O Ram," Vishwamitra said, "you have been chosen to rid this forest of its terror. Tataka is no ordinary demoness. She is powerful, with strength equal to 1,000 elephants. But she is also blinded by her rage and hatred. Today, you must end her reign and restore peace to this land." Ram listened with calm determination. His purpose was clear: to restore Dharm and protect the innocent. Lakshman, always by his brother's side, walked with vigilance, ready to support Ram at any moment. They were aware that they had entered Tataka's territory, and every sense was heightened in anticipation. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the forest, reverberating through the very ground they stood on. The monstrous Tataka had sensed their presence. Emerging from the shadows, she was a terrifying sight, her massive form towering over the trees, her eyes glowing with rage, and her roar filled with fury. She had become a manifestation of vengeance and hatred, and her only intent was to destroy all that threatened her domain. Without wasting a moment, Tataka lunged forward, her monstrous strength causing the earth to tremble beneath her. She uprooted trees and hurled them toward Ram and Lakshman, her rage evident in every move. Vishwamitra stepped back, signaling Ram to confront the demoness, while Lakshman stood by, ready to assist. Ram took a deep breath, his eyes focused on Tataka. He raised his bow, which glistened in the dim light of the forest, and strung an arrow. He knew that this was his moment, not just to prove his skill, but to fulfill his duty as the protector of Dharm. He aimed at Tataka, sending the first arrow that struck her arm. The demoness roared in pain, but instead of backing down, her rage intensified. Lakshman, watching his brother with unwavering attention, followed suit. He drew his bow and shot an arrow at Tataka's other arm, hoping to weaken her. But Tataka's strength was immense, and even wounded, she moved with fierce power. Her voice echoed through the forest as she let out a terrifying cry, shaking the trees and filling the air with her wrath. Tataka's attack was relentless. She charged at Ram and Lakshman, her monstrous form thrashing about. She uprooted more trees and hurled them at her attackers. The ground beneath them seemed to shake with every step she took, and the forest was filled with the deafening sound of her roars. But Ram was not one to be intimidated. He moved swiftly, dodging her attacks and aiming his arrows with precision. With each shot, Ram tried to weaken Tataka, but he knew that defeating her required more than just skill. He had to remain composed and focused, for this battle was as much about courage as it was about strength. Ram prayed silently, asking for divine guidance, and then took careful aim. He knew that he needed to make this count to bring an end to the suffering of the forest and the sages. With a powerful pull of his bowstring, Ram released an arrow that struck Tataka's heart. The impact was immediate. Tataka's monstrous form shuddered, and she let out a final, agonized roar that echoed through the forest. She stumbled, her massive body collapsing to the ground with a thunderous crash. The earth trembled as her form hit the forest floor, and a deep silence followed. As Ram and Lakshman stood catching their breath, two figures emerged from the shadows, Subahu and Maricha, Tataka's sons. Enraged by their mother's death, they sought revenge against the young princes. Subahu charged forward, his wrath evident in his fierce attack. Ram, with unwavering focus, confronted him and released an arrow that struck Subahu, ending his life. Maricha, seeing his brother defeated, launched an attack using his own powers, creating illusions to confuse Ram and Lakshman. But Ram's skill and composure prevailed. He aimed another powerful arrow at Maricha, but instead of killing him, it hurled him far into the ocean, effectively removing him from the battlefield. The air seemed to clear, and the forest, which had been filled with an oppressive darkness, began to feel lighter. The birds, which had fled in fear, slowly began to return, and a gentle breeze swept through the trees. It was as if nature itself rejoiced at the defeat of the demoness. The forest, once overshadowed by her terror, was now free. Vishwamitra approached Ram, his eyes filled with pride. "O Ram," he said, "you have done what no one else could. You have restored peace to this land and freed the sages from their fear. Today, you have upheld Dharm and proven that righteousness will always prevail over darkness." Lakshman looked at his brother with admiration, his heart swelling with pride. He knew that this was just the beginning of Ram's journey, and his devotion to his elder brother was further strengthened by witnessing Ram's courage and sense of duty. The sages who had been living in fear came out of hiding, their faces filled with gratitude. They bowed before Ram and Lakshman, offering their blessings and praises. They thanked Vishwamitra for bringing Ram to their aid and for guiding the young prince on his path. They could now perform their yagns in peace without the constant threat of Tataka's terror. Ram, though victorious, remained humble. He bowed to Vishwamitra and the sages, knowing that this was just one step in his journey of upholding righteousness. He looked at Lakshman, and together they knew that their purpose was far greater than this one victory. The forest, once a place of darkness, began to regain its natural beauty. The flowers began to bloom, the trees stood tall, and the sounds of the forest slowly returned. It was as if the forest itself was coming back to life, rejoicing in the defeat of Tataka. The transformation of the forest symbolized the restoration of peace and the triumph of good over evil. With Tataka defeated, Vishwamitra's yagan could now proceed without any hindrance. The sage, who had guided Ram to this victory, knew that Ram was destined for greatness. This victory was not just about slaying a demoness. It was a test of Ram's courage, skill, and commitment to righteousness. As they prepared to continue their journey, Vishwamitra looked at Ram and Lakshman with a sense of fulfillment. He knew that their path was not without challenges, but he was confident that with Ram's courage and Lakshman's loyalty, they would overcome any obstacle that lay ahead.
In our next episode, we will uncover the story of Ahalya, a woman who faced a grievous curse and found redemption through Ram. We'll explore Ahalya's tragic past, the curse that bound her, and how Ram's compassion became her salvation. Join us as we continue through Bala Kanda, witnessing the profound impact of Ram's righteousness and his role as a redeemer. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please share the podcast with friends and family so that we can spread the glorious life of Ram and how Dharm guides us at all phases of our life. While we may not know exactly what happened, this eternal story of the Ramayan serves as a guide for how we conduct ourselves in our day-to-day lives. We have tried to create a story as close as possible to the ancient texts, scriptures, and writings of Valmiki's Ramayan. Until then, may the light of Dharm guide your path.